At a small-town diner in Georgia, a disabled black veteran named Elijah sits alone, quietly enjoying his coffee. Two uniformed officers enter, immediately targeting him with their gaze. They approach his table, not to protect, but to intimidate and mock his service. "Those medals real, boy? Let's see some ID before you keep pretending." Each taunt cuts deeper than his war wounds ever did. What they don't realize is who's watching from 3 booths away. A silver-haired Marine colonel, her eyes steady as artillery fire, slowly stands. Have you ever witnessed someone being disrespected for their service? Tell us in the comments, and if you believe in standing up for our veterans, hit like and subscribe. The Magnolia Diner sat like a faded postcard on the main strip of Carterville, Georgia. Red vinyl booths cracked from decades of loyal customers, waitresses who'd memorized half the town's coffee orders, and a bell above the door that announced each arrival with the same cheerful ding it had since 1962. But cheerful wasn't the word for this particular Tuesday morning. Elijah Washburn hunched slightly over his mug of black coffee, right hand trembling just enough to make the surface ripple. At 43, his face carried more lines than his age deserved, each one earned in Fallujah and Baghdad. The prosthetic leg beneath his jeans remained still, while his good leg occasionally bounced with the nervous energy that never quite left him since coming home. 2 purple hearts and a bronze star sat in a shoebox under his bed. He never wore them. Too many questions. Too many stares. "More coffee, Elijah?" Darlene, the waitress who'd known him since high school, held the pot ready. He nodded, eyes down, the way he always did. The bell chimed again. Elijah's shoulders tensed instinctively as Officers Briggs and Mercer swagger walked in, gun belts creaking, taking up more space than physics should allow. Carterville PD's finest, if you asked them. The town's bullies with badges, if you asked anyone who wasn't white. "Well, look who's here," Briggs said, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Our local hero." The way he said hero made it sound like fraud. 3 booths away, Colonel Valencia Rhodes sipped her tea, back straight as a flagpole, despite her 64 years. 38 years in the Marines had taught her to assess situations before engaging. Her silver hair was cut into a precise bob, and though she wore civilian clothes, pressed khakis and a blue button-down, everything about her screamed military. She'd come to Carterville to visit her niece, not to fight another battle. Yet here one was, unfolding before her. Rhodes watched as Officer Mercer circled Elijah's table like a shark, while conversations throughout the diner hushed to murmurs. The other patrons, mostly white, mostly regulars, suddenly found their pancakes fascinating. They knew what was coming. It had happened before. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken up? Tell us your story in the comments, and if you believe silence only protects the wrong people, hit like and subscribe. "Hey, breakfast crowd," Officer Briggs announced, hand resting on his holster. "Anyone ever verify if this guy really served? A lot of folks buying Army surplus these days, playing dress-up." Elijah's jaw tightened, eyes fixed on the rippling surface of his coffee. "I'm talking to you, buddy," Mercer added, leaning down. "That a real service-connected disability or just a way to get benefits?" Colonel Rhodes set her teacup down with precision. The small clink somehow cut through the diner's tense silence. "Man can't even answer," Briggs smirked. "Probably fake PTSD, too." Elijah's hand tightened around his mug, knuckles whitening as humiliation burned across his face. "What would you do if you saw someone being bullied right in front of you? Would you speak up or mind your own business? Drop your answer below, also hit like and subscribe." "Let's see some ID," Mercer demanded, sliding his hand along the table toward Elijah's wallet. "Just to make sure you're not impersonating military. That's a federal offense, you know." The diner had gone cemetery quiet. Even the sizzle from the grill seemed to have paused in anticipation. Darlene stood frozen by the counter, coffee pot trembling slightly in her grip. "I said," Mercer repeated, voice dropping an octave, "show me your ID." His hand moved to Elijah's shoulder, gripping it hard enough to leave marks. Elijah finally looked up, eyes hollow, yet somehow burning. "Fourth tour," he said quietly. "Lost my leg pulling 2 Marines out of a burning Humvee. You can take your hand off me now, officer." Briggs laughed, the sound like gravel. "Oh, we got ourselves a real American hero, standing up to police officers, just doing their job. Maybe that attitude explains why you people always have trouble with law enforcement." "You people?" Elijah repeated, his voice barely audible. "Veterans with attitude problems," Briggs clarified with a smirk that said they both knew exactly what he meant. Mercer's grip tightened. "Maybe we should discuss your tone down at the station." A metal napkin holder clattered as Elijah's trembling hand knocked it over. Coffee spilled across the table. "Look at that," Briggs announced. "Disturbing the peace now." Colonel Rhodes watched as Elijah's face shifted from humiliation to resignation, the look of a man who'd fought this battle too many times before. It was the same expression she'd seen on countless faces in war zones, civilians who knew resistance meant worse was coming. Her chair scraped against the linoleum as she stood, not dramatically, not rushing, just the deliberate movement of someone who had made a decision. Several heads turned slightly, then quickly back to their plates. No one wanted to get involved. Rhodes straightened her silverware, aligned her teacup with its saucer, and placed her napkin precisely beside them. Everything in its place. Order before action. Then she took a single step forward. From the corner booth, an elderly white couple exchanged glances. "Should we do something?" the woman whispered. "Best not to get mixed up in police business," her husband muttered back. "If you were standing in that diner, would you show courage or keep your head down? Comment your choice below. And if you stand for those who stood for us, like and subscribe now." "Stand up," Officer Mercer commanded Elijah, hand shifting to his baton. "We're going to continue this conversation somewhere more private." Elijah didn't move. "I haven't broken any laws." "Resisting now? Bad choice." Briggs moved behind him, hands reaching for his cuffs. "Especially with your record." "What record?" Elijah challenged, voice hardening. "The one we're about to give you," Mercer smirked, grabbing Elijah's arm. "Unless you want to apologize for your attitude." Colonel Rhodes was 4 steps closer now, moving with the steady patience of someone who had navigated minefields. "Sir," Elijah said, his voice finding unexpected strength, "I've apologized for existing in this town for 3 years now, not today." Briggs yanked Elijah's chair back. "Up, now!" The prosthetic leg caught on the table pedestal. Elijah stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the booth, coffee cups shattering on the floor. "Now you've done it," Mercer announced, grabbing Elijah's wrists. "Destruction of property." A teenager near the counter had her phone out, recording. Briggs pointed at her. "That's illegal, miss. Delete that now." "Actually," came a voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "it isn't." Colonel Rhodes stood 3 feet away, her presence somehow filling more space than seemed possible for her frame. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you," Briggs said without looking at her. "I disagree," Rhodes replied. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I believe it concerns everyone in this diner, especially me. If someone crossed a line they couldn't take back, would you call them out or let the world decide? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too." "Step back, ma'am," Officer Mercer warned, still gripping Elijah's wrist. "This is police business." Colonel Rhodes didn't move. Instead, she reached slowly into her pocket and produced a small leather wallet. She didn't flash it dramatically, just held it open, displaying her military ID. "Colonel Valencia Rhodes, United States Marine Corps, retired as of last month. Before that, I commanded 3 battalions and served in 4 combat zones." Her voice remained conversational, almost pleasant. "I've spent my career identifying the difference between authority and power, Would you like me to explain the distinction, officer? Briggs blinked rapidly, caught between doubling down and backing off. The gentleman you're harassing, Rhodes continued, nodding toward Elijah, wears a 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines pin on his jacket. I noticed it when I walked in. She turned to Elijah. Fallujah? Elijah nodded once, eyes wide with surprise. I thought so. I recognized the 1,000-yard stare. Rhodes turned back to the officers. I also noticed you didn't ask for his ID. You demanded it without cause. You didn't identify a crime. You suggested creating one. Around the diner, phones were rising like periscopes. The teenage girl was still recording, now joined by 3 others. This isn't your jurisdiction, Colonel, Briggs attempted, but his voice had lost its edge. Protecting the Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic is every Marine's jurisdiction, Rhodes replied, taking another step forward. And right now, you're violating at least 3 amendments I swore to defend. When everyone's watching, would you keep pushing for truth or let it go? What would you do? Share your decision in the comments. Also hit like and subscribe. Rhodes placed herself between Elijah and the officers, her movement so natural it seemed like she'd always been standing there. I'm curious which department protocol authorizes harassing veterans in public spaces, she said, her tone suggesting genuine academic interest. Perhaps you could cite the specific code? Officer Mercer released Elijah's wrist, stepping back slightly. We received a complaint. From whom? Rhodes asked. Anonymous tip, Briggs supplied quickly. Said someone was impersonating military. Interesting, Rhodes nodded. I've been sitting here 20 minutes and observed no calls being made to your department. Perhaps dispatch could confirm the time of this anonymous tip. Around them, the diner had transformed. Where there had been fearful silence, now there was a current of whispers. Where there had been downcast eyes, now there were steady gazes. An older white man in a VFW cap stood up from his booth. I served with the 101st Airborne. I'd like to hear about this complaint, too. From the counter, a middle-aged woman in scrubs added, My son's in Afghanistan right now. I'm recording this for him. Rhodes didn't smile, but something in her eyes acknowledged their support. Officers, I believe you're now outnumbered, not by force, but by witnesses. I suggest you consider your next actions carefully. Briggs's hand drifted toward his radio. This isn't over. On the contrary, Rhodes replied, I believe what's ending is the time when Carterville looked the other way. What's beginning is accountability. Would you let injustice slide if it kept the peace? Or would you risk everything to call it out? Share your choice in the comments. Like and subscribe if you believe silence is never the answer. We're leaving, Briggs announced, trying to salvage authority from the situation. But this establishment is now under observation for potential health code violations. Interesting timing, Rhodes observed. I'm sure the county health inspector will note that in their report, along with the 16 citizens who just witnessed the threat. The officers backed toward the door, Mercer adding a final parting shot. You're not from around here. You don't understand how things work in Carterville. I understand exactly how things work here, Rhodes replied. That's the problem. As the bell jingled behind the retreating officers, the diner remained suspended in tense silence for 3 heartbeats, then erupted into motion. People rose from their seats, approached Elijah with handshakes, apologies, awkward expressions of support. The teenage girl who'd been recording handed him her phone number, promising to send the video. For evidence, she said, if you need it. Elijah received it all with visible discomfort, unused to being the center of positive attention. His hand still trembled, but differently now. Rhodes stayed beside him, a buffer between him and the suddenly supportive crowd. She noticed how he flinched at each person who approached too quickly, how his eyes kept darting to exits and windows, combat habits that never quite died. Darlene appeared with fresh coffee and a plate of eggs. On the house, she insisted. Should have done something sooner, Elijah. I'm sorry. The VFW member approached, extending his hand toward Elijah. Jim Calder. Been coming here 20 years. Seen those officers do similar to others. Never said anything. That ends today. Elijah took the hand cautiously. Appreciate it. Don't appreciate me, Calder replied. I was a coward until 5 minutes ago. When the initial commotion settled, Rhodes sat across from Elijah. She didn't crowd him with questions or forced camaraderie. Instead, she simply said, 3-5 Marines. Dark Horse. I lost 17 of my Marines supporting your battalion in Sangin Province. Elijah's eyes met hers directly for the first time. I remember. That was a bad winter. Yes, she agreed. It was. The diner's manager, a thin man with anxious eyes, hovered nearby. Ma'am, I just want to say, those officers, they come in here a lot. They're customers. I can't afford to lose their business? Rhodes finished for him. Or to lose your soul, because those aren't identical calculations. They could make trouble, he continued. They already have, Rhodes replied. For years, apparently. The question is whether that trouble will now be shared appropriately. She turned to the room at large. How many of you have witnessed similar behavior from Carterville Police? Hands rose slowly. First 3, then 7, then 12. And how many reported it? All hands lowered. Understandable, Rhodes nodded. Fear is powerful, but so is documentation. She gestured to the phones still out. What changes things isn't grand speeches or single acts of courage. It's when ordinary people decide that today, the small risk of speaking up outweighs the certainty of remaining silent. Elijah watched her with quiet intensity. They'll be back, he said softly. They always come back. Yes, Rhodes agreed. But this time, they'll find something different waiting. What would you do if the whole room watched you bring someone to justice? Stay strong or show mercy? Let's talk about it also. Hit like and subscribe. Colonel, Elijah said once they were alone in their booth, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I appreciate what you did, but you're leaving town soon. I still live here. Rhodes studied him carefully. You think I've made things worse for you? I know you have, he replied without accusation. Those officers have long memories and creative interpretations of the law. The diner's door opened, and an imposing figure in a sheriff's uniform entered. Conversations immediately hushed. Sheriff Kendrick Vaughn, Carterville's law enforcement head for 15 years, surveyed the room before walking directly to their table. Ms. Rhodes, he nodded. I received a disturbing report from 2 of my officers. I'm sure you did, Rhodes replied, gesturing to the empty seat beside Elijah. Please join us. The sheriff remained standing. They claim you interfered with police business. I interrupted police misconduct, Rhodes corrected him. There's extensive video documentation if you'd like to review it. Sheriff Vaughn's face remained impassive. I'd like to handle this quietly. Officers make mistakes. Perhaps we could discuss this in my office. It was the moment of choice. The backroom deal. The handshake that would smooth everything over while changing nothing. Rhodes could see Elijah tense beside her, expecting her to accept the olive branch and leave him to face the consequences. Instead, she looked directly at the sheriff. With respect, I believe handling things quietly is exactly what's allowed this behavior to continue. I think we need more daylight, not less. Would you show mercy to someone who never showed you respect? Or would you let the consequences do the talking? Let us know in the comments also. Like and subscribe. Sheriff Vaughn's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign that Rhodes' response had affected him. Ma'am, you don't understand our community. I understand communities like yours exist all across America, Rhodes replied. Places where power works differently depending on who's holding it and who's facing it. She reached into her bag and removed a business card, placing it on the table. It bore the insignia of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. My niece, the reason I'm visiting Carterville, works there. She's mentioned that Georgia has several ongoing investigations into patterns of discriminatory policing. Rhodes's finger tapped the card once. I was planning to have dinner with her tonight. Now I'll have something specific to discuss over appetizers. The sheriff stared at the card, then at Rhodes. The calculation was visible in his eyes, weighing risks, considering angles. You'd bring federal heat over one incident? He asked, his voice lower now. This wasn't one incident, Elijah said unexpectedly. Every head turned toward him. This was Tuesday. Last month, Officer Briggs followed me home from the grocery store, flashing his lights every block, then drove off laughing when I finally pulled over. 3 months ago, I was detained for matching a description. There was no description, no report. Others in the diner were nodding now. Rhodes picked up the thread. Sheriff, I respect the difficult job law enforcement faces. I've worked alongside police officers in 4 countries. But respect has to flow both ways, or it isn't respect. It's fear. She stood, not confrontationally, but with quiet certainty. Here's what happens next. I'm going to walk Mr. Washburn to his car to ensure he leaves safely. Then I'm calling my niece, the ACLU, and 3 media contacts I've maintained since retiring. By dinner, Carterville will have options. Address this internally with transparency and accountability, or explain to CNN why veterans are being harassed in your diners. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the sheriff's face. You won't win any popularity contests around here making threats like that. I'm not running for office, Rhodes replied. I'm standing for principles. There's a difference. If someone crossed the line and humiliated you, would you have forgiven them or made sure the world saw what they did? Drop your take in the comments. Also hit like and subscribe. 3 weeks later, Colonel Rhodes sat at the same booth in the Magnolia Diner, watching Elijah Washburn address the small gathering of townspeople and reporters. I'm not comfortable with public speaking, he began, voice steady despite the slight tremor in his hands. But silence hasn't served this town well, so here we go. Behind him stood Sheriff Vaughn, markedly less comfortable than at their last encounter. Beside the sheriff was Mayor Patricia Lee, a woman who'd been conspicuously absent during the initial confrontation, but who now wore her most engaged expression for the cameras. The settlement reached with Carterville Police Department includes mandatory training on veteran issues, civilian oversight of complaint procedures, and body cameras funded through department budget reallocation rather than tax increases, Elijah continued, reading from prepared remarks. Rhodes sipped her tea, observing not just the speakers but the diner's other patrons. Jim Calder from the VFW sat with 5 other veterans, men and women who had emerged from the woodwork once the story broke. Darlene moved between tables, refilling coffee cups, her eyes frequently darting to the proceedings with unconcealed pride. Officers Briggs and Mercer were notably absent, having been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation that, for the first time in Carterville history, included civilian review. Most importantly, Elijah was saying now, his voice finding new strength, this agreement acknowledges that what happened here wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that affected many community members. That acknowledgement matters more than any policy change. When the formal statements concluded and the reporters packed their equipment, Rhodes finally approached Elijah. You didn't stay for the press conference, he noted. It wasn't my story to tell, she replied. Wasn't my idea to tell it either, he admitted with the ghost of a smile. But once things started moving, he gestured around the diner, where small groups were engaged in animated conversation. It's different now. Not perfect. Different. Rhodes nodded. That's usually how progress works, not in revolutions but in small rooms where people finally decide that the way things are isn't the way things have to be. Elijah extended his hand. I never properly thanked you. Rhodes took it firmly. You did something harder than thanking me. You stayed and finished what we started. Some say forgiveness is strength. Others say it's surrender. If you were the veteran today, would you forgive the officers, or let them face justice fully? Tell us below. Like and subscribe, too. The camera pulls back from the Magnolia Diner, now bustling with new energy. The building looks the same. Faded sign, cracked vinyl booths, but something fundamental has shifted inside. This wasn't just about two bullies with badges or one veteran who endured their abuse too long. It wasn't even about the woman who finally stood up when others wouldn't. It was about what happens in the space between courage and consequence, that moment when a community decides who it truly is. We all face that choice daily: to witness injustice and walk away, or to stand, not with grand gestures or viral heroics, but with the quiet conviction that some things are worth the discomfort of speaking up. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. And justice doesn't arrive with thunder. It begins with someone simply refusing to sit down. If you enjoyed today's story, like, share, and subscribe for more justice stories like this.